When people question whether children's literature is still relevant, I think they often underestimate what children's books can do. They may imagine them as simple, soft, or separate texts from the real world, but in reality, the texts I have chosen show something much more powerful. They show that children's literature can help children meet difficult histories, real-world issues, and ask moral questions without looking away. My collage brings together images from One Day, Anissa's Alphabet, Jundamura, and The Flying Angel. It is not bright or cheerful, and that was intentional. There are faces, chains, planes, frightened children, and fragments of text. I wanted it to feel layered because history itself is layered. These books remind us that history is not only made from dates or facts, but is shaped from real people's lives. It is shaped by fear, loss, courage, memory, and hope. This is where picture books become so powerful. They are sometimes treated as easy text because they use images and fewer words, but that view is very limited. Manti and Kervin suggest that reading picture books involves more than just decoding print. Children also interpret visual, cultural, and social meanings. They notice faces, colour, setting, and symbolism sometimes before they can fully explain what those things mean. The images in my collage do not simply decorate the stories, but they carry the emotional weight of them. The large words "One Day" sit to the right of my collage. I use them because One Day is one of my chosen texts, but also because the phrase captures something important about children's literature. It can slow history down. A historical event like the Holocaust can feel too enormous for children to understand all at once. However, literature can bring that history closer through telling the story of one family, one hiding place, one decision, and one act of survival. In One Day, Michael Rosen and Benjamin Phillips tell us a true story of courage and survival during the Holocaust. Their repeated idea of getting through one day at a time makes survival understandable without making the story simplistic. The book does not go into detail about every detail of the Holocaust, but it doesn't need to. Instead, it gives children an emotionally safe entry point into a devastating part of history. The faces in the book and in my collage remind us that the people affected by history were not just numbers, figures. They were real people with names, families, memories, and lives. Another part of my collage is the alphabet fragments from Anissa's Alphabet. The alphabet is usually familiar and safe for children. It's something they encounter in early learning. But in this book, each letter opens a part of Anissa's refugee experience. For example, D is for danger from which we ran. R is for rugged refugee, something that I never wanted to be. These lines are simple, but they are not shallow. They show how accessible language can carry deep, complex, emotional weight. This book matters because it turns the word refugee into a real human story. Children might hear words like refugee, asylum seeker, or migrant on the news on the TV, but those words can feel distant or political. Anissa's Alphabet makes the experience personal. Anissa is not a label, but she is a real young girl with a name, a family, a fear, imagination, and hope. This connects with Bishop's idea that literature can act as mirrors or windows. For some children, Anissa's story may reflect something similar that they've gone through. For others, it becomes a window into a life that they have not lived. In both cases, the book asks children to recognize another person's dignity. That is where empathy begins, not with pity, but with seeing somebody else as fully human and recognizing their experience. The third text in my collage is Jundamura by Mark Greenwood and Terry Denton. This book brings in another reason children's literature matters: truth-telling. Jundamura helps children think about First Nations history, country, colonization, and resistance, and whose stories are remembered. One of the most powerful lines in the book is, "We are still here and strong." This line matters because it refuses to place First Nations people only in the past. The book shows colonization as violent and disruptive, but it also centers continuing strength, knowledge, and survival. Bottleho and Rudman's work on critical multicultural literature is useful here because they encourage readers to consider whose voices are centered and how power is shown. Jundamura allows children to ask questions that matter. Who gets called an outlaw? Who gets to be remembered as the protector? Who has the power to rename people and places? This also connects to the course text, The Glim by Emily Rodder. While it is a fantasy book rather than a historical picture book, it still helps children think about the real world. Through Finn's experiences, the story shows that adults do not always make wise or ethical choices. Master Rix uses his authority to control Finn and destroy his drawings, which symbolize Finn's creativity and sense of hell. That moment is vulnerable and confronting because an adult authority is not used to protect a child, but to silence him. The Glim reminds us that fantasy does not take children away from reality, but it gives them another way to think about power, unfairness, empathy, and courage in the world. The final book represented in my collage is The Flying Angel. This text focuses on Marie Craig, a nurse in the Royal Australian Air Force nursing service during World War II. I included the nurse imagery, the plane, and the Red Cross because this book broadens children's understanding of courage. Lots of children learn about war and the focus is on soldiers, battles, and weapons, but The Flying Angel shows that courage can also look like care. Marie comforts wounded soldiers, flies into danger, and helps save lives. History is not only shaped by those who fight, but also shaped by those who heal, comfort, and protect. Crawford and Calabria argue that picture books can offer accessible ways for children to engage with sensitive issues and multiple perspectives. That is exactly what these texts do. They do not reduce history or difficult ideas to easy morals. They give children a way to think about suffering, injustice, courage, and ethical choice without being left alone with those ideas. So my collage is not just a collection of serious images. It is a call to take children's literature seriously. The clock, the alphabet, the chains, the nurse, the planes, the fragments of the text all point towards the same argument. Children's literature opens children's eyes to the real world, but it does so with care. So as future educators, we should not treat children's books as extras or time fillers. We should see them as powerful teaching tools. They can help children understand and remember the past, understand others, question injustice, and imagine more compassionate futures. Children's literature matters because it does not turn away from the world. It helps children look at the world closely, honestly, and with empathy. And that is exactly why it deserves a serious place in our classrooms.